So David has already told you, this is Maggie's and my last Sunday. Therefore, at least my last sermon that I will deliver for you. And like he also indicated that we had dinner together last night and we talked about another time. Next year, the schedule's already booked, but maybe in 2026. So, Christian and Judith, you got a couple of years to get your schedule together and get back here. Megan, I've just been so glad to be here. And I want to wrap up our time in John 15, really with a word of encouragement, because this final section from the vine and the branches passage is really very applicable to North Sea Baptist Church. Primarily because of the things that Maggie and I have come not only to appreciate, but really admire about this place. That this church is vibrant with life. I mean, there's just energy and fun and laughter and sharing and hugs. I mean, good grief, it's a Norwegian church. And yet there are hugs. Although I was taught this morning that in the Netherlands it's 3 kisses on the cheek. Lars wouldn't do it. He just wouldn't give me 3 kisses. And there's part of why that happens is because this is a safe place. That's what you've worked hard at, that people can come from all over the world and find it's safe here. Now, I know that there are those that might say, well, what do you think? They come to Norway. Norway is the perfect place. I know you think I'm imitating Kurt. I'm not. But it is true. Norway is the paradise, right? Except that even in paradise, sometimes people can get lonely. And so here, not only do you find friends, you find family, you know. Another thing I like is that North Sea Baptist is not a reservoir. Does that word connect with you? It's a man-made pond or whatever to hold water. And water just sits there. North Sea Baptist is a river where people will come, they will be encouraged, they'll be strengthened, they'll be taught, and then they move on to another place. Each time Maggie and I return, we find great delight in meeting new people, and we've met many this time around, and it's been delightful. But we miss the ones that have been here before, and for me, I can't help but imagine that for those of you, maybe not so much you guys, Judith and Christian, because you went home to the Netherlands and there was church there, but others move on to another assignment, another place in Europe or Southeast Asia. When people would leave First Baptist of Wheaton, I'd get calls back from them in terms of how difficult it was for them to find a church where they belong, where they would fit in. Something like North Sea Baptist, and I would bet, Dave, you get those same kind of comments. Because this is such a special place. But my concern in that is that as I watched my congregants struggle, that the longer you stay away from the church, the more your spiritual life begins to wither. So it's important that you do get connected. But I understand why it's difficult, because you're thinking, I'm looking for this, and where do I find it? But that brings me back to John 15, because you see, the church is critically important in the well-being of the believer. No doubt about it. But it's not what's most important, is it? I'm going to ask a simple question. You know all the answer because you're in church. What is most important? Oh my goodness. 10 weeks. Jesus, good. I know it sounded like a squirrel, but it's Jesus. And that vine thing. Let me give you a quote. This quote comes from that guy, Wayne Jacobson. He grew up in an orchard in California, wrote a book in my father's vineyard. Here's what he has to say. On a grapevine, the only difference between a cane and a branch is longevity. A cane is a new shoot that gets cut away, the product of one season. A branch is a part of the vine that's been there a long time. And that's why we find it difficult when we leave a church. When Maggie and I left First Baptist of Wheaton, we're at a good church in North Carolina. But it's not like this one. And I'm not trying to denigrate it. We're glad to be there. But it's when we connect for the long haul. And the only way we will continue to connect in the church, we have not found a perfect church, but we have found a good church. Because vine life, a vineyard is a long-term crop. The more mature vines, branches, create more fruit than the younger ones. And what has encouraged me in this section of John 15 is that what we find is God wants what most of us want. His goals are our goals in terms of a long-term relationship. And that's the emphasis in this particular passage. What I want you to see is that fruit that we talked about last week, it's possible because it's created in what I call the ideal spiritual environment. That's John 15, starting in verse 9. So let's look at that together. Follow along. This is Jesus speaking, and he says, I've loved you even as the Father has loved me. Now remain in my love. When you obey my commands, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I told you these things so that you'll be filled with joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you are my friends, if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves, because master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father told me. You didn't choose me. I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask using my name. And this is my command: love each other. I hope what you've seen over these last many weeks is that this vine life thing isn't some burdensome obligation as a Christian. Oh, okay, I gotta abide in Jesus. Remaining in the vine is simply remaining in an environment of joy and love, kind of like you have created here, which is a small scale of the eternal kingdom. Love. Love is the soil in which joy thrives. It was funny, on Thursday night, I get to do my privileged activity of getting locked in the bedroom for 3 hours while women meet in the living room. And there were, how many were there of you guys? 8, maybe? 10? The noise! There was one morning when I went over to the Betelgeuse, because I was Maggie's transportation that day. And there were people talking all around me, but it didn't bother me, because there was Norwegian. I didn't understand a word they said. But you ladies were talking English, and you were laughing, and you were having fun, and you were making comments, and you were... Oh. Did you hear that in the back? She said, imagine the retreat. Men, that strikes terror into our hearts, does it not? Oh, my. That's how. So let me take you through these verses to show you how Jesus says this thing, this vine life, is supposed to work. And what he starts with is we're going to look at the supreme command. And the supreme command is love one another. Verse 12. This is my commandment, says Jesus. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. Now, my guess, that's not new information to you, is it? You know that we're called to love each other. But may I point out that it is oftentimes, not just in the church, but all walks of life, that the things that we know, those things that are the simplest, most basic, often get overlooked. We forget about them. Illustration. I have a friend who is one of these master, can fix anything kind of guy. And they had just bought a new home, moved into the home, only to discover that the refrigerator didn't work. Not to worry. My friend spent the next half a day taking the refrigerator all apart, testing all the parts, putting it all back together. Still didn't work. Oh, he said, let me check the outlet. So he takes the outlet apart, he puts new pieces in there, puts it all back together. Still doesn't work. So he goes to the circuit panel, opens the circuit panel, the switch is up, and he's thinking, what is going on? So he took the cover off said circuit panel. Guess what? The contractor forgot to attach the wires to that particular circuit. I felt pretty good because I'm not that great of a fix-it man, and I'm thinking, why didn't you start there? If the fridge isn't working, maybe it's not getting electricity. The simplest things, even professionals. I mean, this guy is good. I called upon him all the time to help me fix things. Sometimes the church can sputter in its church life and what God is wanting it to do. It may not be that there's major sin in the camp. It may be we've just forgotten what it means to love one another. The other thing I want to point out, though, and it's not obvious in the English text because we just have one word, love. But here, this is not Hollywood movie kind of love, self-interest kind of love. I love you until. Anybody want to guess what the word is, the Greek word is in this passage? Very good. Agape. What's the uniqueness and special feature of agape love? It's self-sacrificing. It's I die. Guys, Ephesians 5. Yes, there is this submit word given to women, and if I had time, I'd teach you the correct understanding of that. But guys, go down to verse 25, and we are called to agape our wives. What does that mean? Well, he highlights it. He says, agape them just as Christ did the church. And what did he do for the church? He died for her. It's a dying to self kind of love. He goes on to say, in the same way I have loved you. With that kind of die to self love. Yeah. See, the magnificence of the vine life is we thrive because Jesus and his love are there. And it's a long distance thing. But let's go to the second thing that Jesus highlights. One, it's the supreme command to love one another. Second, the supreme command, or the supreme standard, it's the love of Jesus. Okay? The love of Jesus. Let's go to 5:13. Heather, 5:13. Keep going. There we go. Keep going. There we go. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for a friend, which we just alluded to. Agape. Keep in mind, Jesus knew exactly what he was talking about when he talked about lay down his life for his friends, because it will be less than 24 hours until he is betrayed before the Sanhedrin and will be led out to Golgotha. That phrase, lay down my life, or lay down one's life, isn't theoretical, it isn't hyperbole, it isn't make-believe. And for us, guys, we are on this side of the cross. We had Old Testament prophecies and kind of got an image of what was going to take place. But we know in detail what Jesus sacrificed for us. Is there anything that can keep us from a long-term relationship with Jesus when we understand what he did for us? You may not know the name Bruce Reagan, well-known speaker in the United States, especially in the youth context. And it was back in my youth ministry years when I was at a big conference and Bruce was speaking. It was an amazing time. And he told a story. He was in London, met a woman who had been doing phenomenal work in the worst part of London. And so he had a chance to talk to her, and he kept saying to her, why? Why do you do what you do? And finally she said, all right. Bruce, I'm Jewish. I don't know if you know that. Many years ago, I was running from the Gestapo in World War II. But they were closing in on me, and I was going to get caught. That very day, a Christian widow shows up where I was hiding and says, okay, dearie, it's time for you to leave. To which I said, this is a woman speaking, they're going to catch me anyway. The widow said, yes, they are going to catch someone, but not you. I want your identification papers. Thank you. I will wait here. You now leave. And the woman went on to say, it suddenly dawned on me what she was talking about. That they were going to find a woman, the widow, thinking it was her who was running. And it just blew her away. Well, obviously, the woman escaped, right? Because Bruce got to meet her. The widow was caught. And 6 months later, she was dead in a concentration camp. And then she looked Bruce in the eye and she said, Bruce, you want to know why I did what I did? Why do I do? It's because I asked that widow, why? Why are you doing this for? You mean you don't know me? And she said to me, it's because what Jesus did for me, that I want to do it for you. And the day came that she put her life in the hands of Jesus Christ, and she said, I can't do enough given what he's done for me. And I can still remember that experience, and I can feel it in my eyes, that there was not a dry eye in that vast crowd of thousands, thinking, what did Jesus do for me? I will do it for my friends. Wow. See, loving like Jesus, it may sound overwhelming, but it's not when we think, he did it for us. And when we remain in him, here's just one more point of the passage. If you remain in my love, just as I remain in his love. Whose love? The Father. Some of the Father comes into this whole equation, and it's amazing. Can you think of a finer promise to claim and a deeper relationship to pursue than this? See, growing in Jesus and the Father's love is nothing short of a lifetime adventure. But let's move on to the third thing Jesus talks about, and that's the supreme bond. And it's simply friendship. You are my friends, says verse 14, if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I've told you everything the Father told me. You probably don't know this name. Pepper Rogers. Anybody? Would have to be an American. Pepper Rogers was the football coach for the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. Now, it's the American football where they use their hand. I didn't come up with the name. I don't know why it's called that, but that's what they call it. And Pepper was a very, very successful coach for many years until mid-'80s, and everything began to fall apart. It was so horrible, Pepper says, that even my family would avoid me, would stay away from me. And he said, so one day I went and confronted my wife, and I said, quote, ready with the slide, my dog was my only friend, so I told my wife that a man needs at least 2 friends. So she bought me another dog. All right, the point I'm trying to make is not that you need another dog, but isn't it true? We got to have more than one friend. Now, there are some people who claim, I don't need anybody, I don't need friends. And most of us, when we look at that person, we realize, probably not terribly healthy. Name Mark Twain mean anything to you? Author of the book Tom Sawyer and others. He said this, good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. This is the ideal life. I particularly like this one from an artist named Linda Grayson. There is nothing better than a friend, unless it's a friend with chocolate. I like that one. Chocolate or not, friends bring beauty to life, like flowers in the summer. I mean, who'd want to live in a world with no color? The thing that Maggie and I have continually been amazed, this time around, spring, last time around, your daffodils. They last forever. And they are planted everywhere. Over in the States where we live, it gets too hot quickly and the daffodils fade. But it's just, and even over by the airport, there's a smiley face of daffodils. But the other thing is friends. I mean, they bring strength, right? Look at Ecclesiastes 4. Ecclesiastes 4. 2 are better than 1 because they've got a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. Isn't it interesting, given that context, that we live in an era where we actually count our friends, right? At least those of you, not me, who are on Facebook. Because you know how many friends you have. Because Facebook tells you how many people are your friends. What's really odd, though, is if that friend, because all friends can disappoint us, can hurt us or whatever, and we don't like something about our friends, what can we do on Facebook? What do? Listen to yourself. Oh, we just unfriend them. Wouldn't it be nice? David, there were times in pastorate I would have loved to unfriend certain people in my congregation, you know. Just, okay, this one, unfriend. Or difficulties, unfriend. That's not how life works, is it? We take it all. Because that's the nature of friendship. And we take it because we don't need to worry about this relationship, friendship context. Because who is in this relationship context? Who chose us? It wasn't we who chose him. And again, this is an answer, you're in church. Who chose us? Wow, robust. This is amazing. Judith, teach them how to do the triple cheek kiss thing, would you? And anybody remember what Jesus said? I will never leave you. I will never desert you. Talk about a long-term relationship in the vine. When you got Jesus as the primary friend, even those that you'd like to unfriend, it's okay. Because that supreme relationship is friendship. Now the supreme purpose. Let's finish there, because this goes back to what we talked about last week, the fruitfulness. Verse 16, I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask using my name. Now last week, we talked about 3 different categories of fruitfulness: character, conduct, converts. Well, let me go back to that third one real quick. And these are simple questions. And Faith, would you shout it out just so I don't get insecure? If I plant zinnia seeds, what can I expect? Zinnias. Oh, good. If I plant an apple seed, what can I expect? Ooh, it's catching. If I plant soybeans, what can I expect? Soybeans. When you plant a seed, you get what you planted. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are in the vine, we are part of the grapevine. If we plant a seed of the grapevine, what will we get? Part of the grapevine. People like us. Whether it's here in Stavanger or some distant, hinterland called the Netherlands, or some other place like Western North Carolina. It's not hard to figure out. God wants to keep replicating. Anybody know the name Karl Barth? A couple of people. He's an American biblical theologian. Had to read a lot about him in seminary, and he wasn't my favorite because he's kind of hard to read. He's kind of complicated, and I'd have to read 2 or 3 times to finally get what he was saying. Well, there was one quote that has stuck with me ever since seminary, and it's this. The Bible does not say, go and celebrate services. Go and edify yourself with the sermon. Go and devise a theology. Now, there's nothing to forbid all this, yet in it all, the one thing must prevail: proclaim the gospel to every creature. Now listen to this. This one's woo. Where the church is living, it must ask itself whether it is serving this commission or whether it is a purpose in and unto itself. If the second is the case, then as a rule it begins to smack of the sacred, to affect piety, to play the priest, and to mumble. Anyone with a keen nose will smell it and find it dreadful. Christianity is not sacred. Rather, there breathes in it the fresh air of the Spirit. Otherwise, it's not Christianity. For it is an out and out worldly thing, open to all humanity. Quote, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to all creatures. Folks, that's what I believe is happening here at North Sea Baptist. There's this passion that says we want to see other fruit. We want to see others coming. There is, in my experience, no more thrilling thing than to be in a room praying with somebody, seeing them step into the family of God through a now initiated faith in Jesus Christ. But whether you are here and stay on for years to come, like Kurt, or whether you move on or go somewhere else. Folks, when the church just kind of becomes focused on itself, it does begin to stink. And it's not very attractive. But when the church is engaged in all of these things, love and friendship and fruitfulness. Did you notice the last verse? Verse 11 I have. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. Anybody got too much joy in their life? I doubt it. Jesus says, here's how it all works together in the vine. And what you'll find is instead of waking up each morning saying, oh, good Lord morning, you're going to wake up and say, "Good morning, Lord. What are we about today as I abide in the vine?" That's the passage. That's what I believe God has for North Sea Baptist Church in Stavanger, Norway. And I look forward to what he's going to do here and all around the world. It's funny, David has reminded me that as I stand here, there are people in India listening, there are people in Southeast Asia listening, there are people in Africa that are listening. It's us, people, touching the world because we're part of the vine. That's vine life. Yes? Okay. So Lord, thank you. Thank you for your word. You don't make it complicated. It's not something really hard. In fact, it's joyous. It's magnificent. So may we go from here, not so much gritting our teeth, "Oh, you better do better to be in the vine," but to simply relax and say, "Jesus, here I am. Here I am. Use me for your glory and my good, for the kingdom's sake." And on that note, I'm not going to say amen. I want you to just take a few moments to be quiet and talk to Jesus. You need to talk to him. What do you need to say? Where do you want to go with this? And then we will celebrate the Lord's table communion together.